Have you ever wondered what's going on in Iraq? Are you confused about the war? Do you know anyone who has been to Iraq? Do you have any questions you would like to ask someone who has been to Iraq? If you can answer yes or maybe to any of those questions, I'd like to welcome you to BigMediaUSA.com. I'm January Jones, the wine tester. I'd like to welcome you to my show, Thou Shalt Not Wine, the 11th Commandment. Today my guest is a young comedian named Tom Irwin, and he has had the opportunity of going to entertain our troops. And I've invited him here today to share with you his incredible experience. He has produced a DVD called 25 Days in Iraq. Hi, Tom. Welcome.
Hi, January. Good afternoon.
Oh, it's so nice to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for so long.
Thank you.
We'd like to start out with your background, and could you tell my audience where you're from and how you got started in comedy?
I am originally from Buffalo, New York, and I grew up in the Rust Belt, which is kind of an interesting part of who you become. And got out of there, and but I started doing comedy in Buffalo, New York, and I began working at a club called the Comedy Trap, which is a place that just was locals could go up and start doing things, and I just, I've always wanted to do it, but when I was growing up, they didn't have, they had firemen, policemen, that kind of thing, but they didn't have stand-up comic, and obviously it wasn't going to be something I told my dad either. He wouldn't have thought that was a vocation that was preferred.
How old were you when you did your first stand-up?
I was 27.
Oh my gosh.
27, and I waited since 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
So it was a long time coming, and it was just one day I said, this is it, I'm going to start. And
wonderful.
I remember my first gig, I was on stage for about 53 seconds, and my shirt was completely stuck to my back from sweat, and I jumped off the stage and was a nervous wreck, and I asked them, I said, how'd I do? And they said, you had some soft spots there, but I said, can I come back next week? And they said, yeah, come on back. So that was the beginning of it.
Oh, wonderful. That's a great story. Let me ask you, how does a comedian end up in Iraq? What led you to go on your tour of Iraq, and who did you go with? And tell us something about that trip.
Well, I actually, flashback again. I'm an Army veteran as well.
Okay, and how long were you in the Army?
2 years.
2 years.
So
okay.
I did an Army stint, and I was just a regular Joe Army guy, and I got out, and it's funny, once I distanced myself from my time in the service, I began to appreciate it more because of the lessons that it seems to teach you in life about, the military doesn't care if you get along with somebody enough to say, well, I don't know if I want to work with him. I'd rather work with someone. They just, you just do your job, you get it done. And so it was a really interesting way that you don't see how it helps you in your life. I mean, for me personally, but and then once the war started, I thought to myself, well, now that I'm doing comedy and they do comedy for the military, I thought I really would like to figure out how to get this done.
What group did you go over with? Was it an organized like the USO, or what type of group?
Actually, it's a group that works with Armed Forces Entertainment. USO is a subsidiary of Armed Forces Entertainment, but they hire a company called Comics on Duty. You can go to their website, Comics on Duty, and they send all of us over there. And so the big thing with Comics on Duty is they pride themselves on going to the worst spots because they figured that's what those are where the soldiers need the most laughs. So we just and they're based out of Michigan, but that's who I went with. And
how many went with you at that?
First four. There was 4 of us the first time, and
were you terrified?
Honestly, I'd have to say I quantify it like this: when you have to suspend belief in the fact that you're in a war zone, because I think you would split in half from stress. Right. So I just pretended I was in like the Midwest, just in a really horrible little town in the Midwest, and that kind of seemed to get me through. So that was and I got the call from Comics on Duty, and they asked me. They said, "Can you go to Iraq and do shows for us?" And I said, well, that's very interesting. They said, well, no, we need to know today, like right now. And so I said, okay, which sounds brave, but it wasn't, because I was terrified of my choice. But I just figured I would just deal with it until I had to leave. And so tell my, family and things like that. So that was the, and it's funny because I've gotten other people to go since then. I've gotten them hooked up with Comics on Duty.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's funny how the news changes when you know you're going to Iraq, how the nightly news has a lot more significance. Because I called my friend, I said, what do you think about the news lately? He's like, geez, it seems so heavy over there. I said, well, yeah, you're leaving in 2 weeks, so of course it's going to freak you out.
Oh, you know? Absolutely. Now, what was your first impression when you got, now, let me go back. You went there how many times?
4.
4 times.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, on your very first trip, was that to Afghanistan or Iraq?
Iraq.
What was your impression when you stepped off the plane?
Well, we landed in Mosul, which is in northern Iraq.
Okay.
It was 38 degrees, and it had snowed the day before, so it was muddy and cold, which was odd. I thought, there's going to be guys on flying carpets and things like that. I just had all those dumb, American, generalizations about them. But I got off and it was really cold and snowy but very green and hilly. It looked like
what time of year was that?
It was in February. So it looked like kind of a place in, like Tarzana that wasn't developed yet, or something like that.
California.
Yeah, it looked like kind of a part of the valley that just wasn't quite built up yet. But
oh my gosh,
interesting. Like it just threw me for a loop. That it was cold and muddy, and that was, and plus you're stepping onto the actual ground of a war zone. So so that's like, I was just, what is it going to be like? And it's just, you're just on the other side of the planet. So
now, do you remember where you did your first show?
Yes, actually in Mosul.
Oh, okay.
In Mosul, and it was as soon as we stepped off the plane, they just clapped their hands and they're like, "Let's go! You have a show. There's a group of people waiting for you." And it was right. Okay. It was on. Right. It was,
Now, was this 4 fellow comedians, or were there any girls in the troupe?
There was one woman with us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
And so she was very well received, as you can imagine.
Was she cute?
I can imagine why Marilyn Monroe was so revered by the troops. I mean, there couldn't be there was a line of guys just asking her, if they could hold her stuff. Can I carry your bag for you? I mean, she didn't have to lift a finger.
So that was great.
They walk right past us like, where's that girl that you guys are with? So yeah, we were kind of invisible at points, but they were very, but guys have been there a long time, so they miss miss seeing girls and so.
Now, when you got there, what kind of accommodations? Where did you sleep, and how did you travel?
We slept in basically wherever troops slept, we slept.
Oh, okay.
So we went out, and there were times where we would.
Now, I don't know. Where do troops sleep?
Well, there were buildings or tents, or, we would sleep in, we landed in one place, which was 6 miles from Iran, and they were almost surprised to see us. They said, the media doesn't come here. No one comes here. It's so dangerous here. They said, and you just show up.
My gosh.
I said, well, can we come in? They said, yeah.
Surprise.
So, I mean, they had no barbershop, no general store, which is called a PX. They had nothing. And they had, in the building we stayed in, had no door, and they had no steps because the mortar round had taken it off. And they're just like, they had a piece of wood that slid over, and they're just like, well, these are your rooms, so, do your best. And so
now, what kind of protection did you wear? Did you have
flak vests and helmets?
Okay, exactly what the troops had.
Yeah. Well, we had the visitor version of them.
Was that a little...
We were like the ones you buy at the Gap, sort of. They weren't quite they weren't quite armored up like they were, but they were actually the ones that the military first had, and then they realized that they were insufficient as far as their protection, so they would just use the military would get different ones, and guests like as comics would get these.
Okay, because they figured you probably weren't going to be
the
on
helmets were real. The helmets were real, and people have had to perform in helmets, because of the danger.
Thou Shalt Not Whine. We'll be right back.